You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 511, or is it 12? 511. Tonight, we're going to talk about everything you need to know, getting ready for the new Ahsoka series, and maybe, if you're lucky, some things you probably don't need to know. And to do that, I am joined, first off, by Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. If there's one guarantee that people are going to get out of the show, it's going to be a whole lot of things that they don't need to know, but they get to know anyway, because that's why they love us.
Yes. And speaking of those we love, how about that transition? Also with us is a third member of the show. Lauren's joined us tonight to talk about Ahsoka. Lauren, how are you doing?
I'm good. And I do have to say that even if they don't need to know it, they're better off for knowing it. So I think it's all going to work out in the end.
Yes.
I like where your head's at.
Yeah.
The quality that we bring to the show every week. So, okay, before we get started, we got a lot to talk about here. So before we get started, I think Jonesy has a few public service announcements to some of our patrons.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you to all of our Patreon members, especially those as part of the tribe. Rob, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Risk, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, C, Jacob, Steve, Reed, or Reborn. Those last few always trip me up. They're really hard to say, and I try to say it fast, which just doesn't help. And then our Delusions of Grandeur members, Rod, CJ, and Alex. Of course, if you're curious about Patreon, cantinacast.com/Patreon, we actually ran a Patreon poll. And then the amazing @Lauren Covers Star Wars also ran it on her Instagram, asking our dear members what they were most excited about with the Ahsoka series. And we actually have the results to share about that. So if you were looking for another reason to go join Patreon, you get cool things like that. And you also get to watch me play pinball and all sorts of other stuff. But one other thing that we before we get to the results of the poll, again, just to plug Patreon From a Certain Point of View, starting this Sunday, we will start our top 3 moments from the Rebels series. So this Sunday, we're doing season 1. And then each Sunday for the next 3 after that, we'll do 2, 3, and 4. So if you are interested in that, the now part of the tribe and the Delusions of Grandeur tiers they get kind of preferential treatment to be able to come on the show. Just let us know you're interested. And if you're part of the This Is the Way tier, then you are also eligible. So please go out check those out. If you're interested and you haven't signed up yet, send me a ping, reply to the message, whatever it is, let me know, get my attention, and I'll get you in the hopper. We do them at 10 p.m. on Sundays. But now the results of the poll. Albert, you didn't vote, by the way, so that was not cool, by the way. Just saying.
Maybe he couldn't decide.
I was preoccupied for like the last 3 hours, so I apologize in advance.
That's all right. Brian kind of got you. He covered you, though, because...
Oh, did he?
I'll get there. Yeah, he did a write-in vote for you. But yeah, so here's what we had. So 19% were interested in Ahsoka, specifically, right? Title character makes a lot of sense. This is what I'm a little bit surprised about. Coming in second place was Thrawn at 22%. Coming in third place, so Ahsoka was second place, Ahsoka was third place, Thrawn was second. Fourth place was Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati. That's what I voted for, 16% there.
Respectful.
Yeah, not too bad, but 34%. And again, we had to kind of pull these together because of limitations on Instagram and stuff, but Ezra, Sabine, or Hera kind of grouped them together because maybe individually they're not as much, but 34% of people were really interested in one of those characters or more. And most of those votes came to Sabine and Hera, actually. Mm-hmm. So really interesting. Now, 9% were other, the writing category.
Okay.
And we had Mon Mothma.
Oh.
We had Dave Filoni, which I guess is actually legit because it's live action, right? So he could show up. And then Brian had your back, buddy, because he said heir to the Empire.
Oh.
I mean, that's pretty broad. Not really character, but that's all right.
Right.
Heir to the Empire has been recognized, has been covered. You are in good shape, my friend. So you have soulmates out there you didn't realize you had.
So long as those 4 words are uttered, I think we're covered. So I think it's going to happen, quite honestly, because it's in the trailer.
The show, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope they make it on the cutting room floor. I hope it doesn't show up. It's just for the trailer.
Oh, that would be awful.
I would hate you. I would hate you. You would never let me forget it either. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's really easy to forget Ben Solo's
Oh, Ben
last words of
Solo's
Rise-
lines. Yeah, Bryce Skywalker. Womp womp.
I thought about the other day. I haven't given you a hard time on this in a long time, so I figured I had to do it at some point.
Yeah,
It's time. Yeah.
it is time. That's awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining in that poll. I'm sorry I missed out on it, but yeah, that's interesting that, and I think we'll get into some of this a little bit later, but there is a lot of anticipation in folks looking at this as, Rebels season 5 or Rebels part 2 or whatever you want to call it. So, I mean, that's a testament to how strong those characters are, how much they develop those characters in that series, and the way that series ended, it just left on such a cliffhanger that you want to know, what is Hera going to do? What's Jason going to do? I mean, God, they threw that in there. I mean, what's her name? Didn't even know who the woman that plays the voices Hera Syndulla.
Oh, Vanessa Marshall?
Vanessa Marshall. Like, she didn't even know that they were going to sneak Jason in there. Remember, she found out when they showed that little teaser thing at Celebration or whatever it was, and she was in tears. So, I mean, stuff like that. And then, of course, with Ezra and Sabine, and, is that relationship ever going to happen? Because we shipped them, 6 years ago now. So, yeah, there's a lot of reasons to come back to Star Wars Rebels, and that makes sense. I like that, actually, quite a bit. All right. What else did you got? You have anything else before we get into the main show?
I think that, Lauren, what was your vote for that? Like, what are you most excited about?
I had the same vote as you. I voted Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati. I feel like they just sound, after hearing Ray Stevenson talk about at Celebration, like the way that his influences on his character and things like that, that really made me more excited for them. So that's probably my main thing.
Sam, I really want to know where that journey was from Order 66 for him, and this idea of, are they Inquisitors? I love the armor. So a lot of question marks. I just want those to be answered. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I just like that Lauren called her Shin Hati, like she's a hottie instead of a hottie.
Hati, I'm
Hati.
sorry.
No, I don't
enunciate.
I don't. Maybe you're right.
No,
What
you're
if-
a Texan. You can say it however you want. It works.
It's my lack of enunciation, Albert. It's fine.
When you're from the South, Albert's kind of from the South, but I mean,
Yeah.
when you're from the South, like Lauren and me, you don't have to enunciate all the
Yeah,
things.
y'all knew what I was saying.
I'm a stinking Yank. Okay, so two things before we get into the main show. So number one, just quick service announcement or show announcement here. This weekend, as Jonesy mentioned, we've got that season 1 Rebels. That's going to be. Are we doing? That's a Patreon. Am I correct? Yeah, Patreon Sunday night. So join us for that. And then we've got a number of things still coming down the road here. We're going to be doing a season of Rebels, talking about our favorite moments here for the next couple weeks. A lot of the content you're going to see here that we've got lined up is going to be around the Ahsoka series and kind of getting you ready, starting with tonight's show. So look forward to that. And there was one other thing. Oh, Lauren, rumor has it that you have a new show out as well. What's going on over there at the Jedi Novel Archives?
So my most recent video that I posted was for issues 6 through 8. No, I'm sorry. Issues 4 through 6. I'm losing count. Issues 4 through 6 of the Yoda comic. So I'm continuing on with that series. And then coming up, I'm going to have once the embargo for Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade lifts, I will be posting my video for that too. So that's going to be coming up soon in the future next week.
And you've already finished reading that one, I assume?
I'm actually not done with it yet, but it is really good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's probably, you can say that. All right, cool. Well, you got, I threw it up there.
There's been a lot of reading lately.
Good.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. So
No
cantinacast.com/YouTube. You can find all of the Jedi Novel Archive videos there, future and past tense. There's quite a library now that Lauren has put together. So great job.
One other thing on the Patreon front, Albert, is next Thursday on the 6th of July, you and I are going to come back and we're going to talk Indy 5 for our Patreon members. So a little bit different, stepping outside of Star Wars, but I mean, it's like Star Wars adjacent, I think is how Indy gets, Indiana Jones is kind of Star Wars adjacent, I think. So we're going to come back and we're going to do a little bit of a overview, impressions, review, whatever you want to call it, of our experience with Indiana Jones in the theater. You've already seen it. Don't spoil it for anybody. I'm going to see it here in the next couple of days. So that's going to be really exciting. So again, if you're curious about Patreon, you'll get some extra content that's not even Star Wars related. That's pretty fancy.
And it's almost like a bonus kind of Patreon content because we normally don't stick. I think this is the first time we've ever ventured outside the proverbial box of Star Wars, if I'm not mistaken, at least
not very
since
often.
our tenure on the show. Yeah.
Not very often, yeah.
So, I mean, we'll go on tangents, of course, but This will be dedicated to Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny. So more on that next week. I'm excited to talk about that. I've got a lot to say about that movie. So, okay. All right, let's get into our main topic, which is going to be talking about Ahsoka. And so the idea here is to kind of, I think for the most part, if you've joined the live stream or you're a listener of this show, you probably kind of know a lot of the main talking points for Ahsoka, her history, anything that you probably need to know leading up to Rebels. So, but there could be some things in here that maybe you didn't get a chance to see, maybe you didn't know, maybe you just needed a refresher. And I think, honestly, if you don't know a whole lot about Ahsoka, I think you'll probably find a lot of value in what we're going to discuss, because we are going to get into how she came to be, and then really kind of end with the connections to Star Wars Rebels, since that was kind of the springboard of this Ahsoka series, and then talk about a little bit about maybe some of the things that we've not had a chance to talk about in speculating what to expect in the Ahsoka series based on all the stuff that we've talked about already. So let's start with the Clone Wars. And I guess the big bullets here are, she was the Padawan of Anakin Skywalker. Originally, she was not the Padawan. Obi-Wan Kenobi had made the call to Yoda, or made the call to the council and said, hey, I want a Padawan. And this is from the Clone Wars movie. So if anybody hasn't seen that, this is where all of this takes place. It was what's really also kind of cool, and this is not really related to Ahsoka, but I always paired Ahsoka and Ventress together. And this was also that first appearance of Ventress. And it's just so funny how I never realized it until just about 2 or 3 years ago while on this show, that they do follow very similar patterns, albeit on different sides of the Force spectrum. Their stories are very closely related. So, in fact, they actually do meet up at some point. But anyways, that just dawned on me again here recently ahead of the show. But yeah, so Anakin Skywalker is the one that, surprise, has a Padawan. Of course, he doesn't want it. We all know about her nickname. He calls her Snips because she's very snippy in the way she remarks to him. She calls him Sky Guy because of his last name. There's also we'll talk about her death on Mortis. So she actually did die. She was stabbed by what was it, the brother, I think it was, with a knife or bit. I can't remember what exactly it was, but anyway, she did pass. Like, she actually physically died, and one of these celestial beings, the daughter's life was given to her so that she could live again. And from that, we also got the Condor, right? The Convor, I should say. So the Convor is that little bird that you see flying around the Ahsoka series. That was Morian, or I forget the name of the Convor itself. Morai, thank you. And I've got a question about that here a little bit later. That's probably trivial, but I would like to see that. And then, of course, that whole Clone Wars series, really, I guess the other big monumental moment is when she's wrongly accused of a murder, basically blowing up a person in an area. And she was basically framed by Barriss Offee, who is kind of, really trying to start separating from the Jedi Order, wasn't happy with the direction they were going. And although she was found innocent through the work of Anakin Skywalker, who was on a mission, I mean, everybody was accusing her of being that person. She was eventually exonerated. However, she walked away from the Jedi Order and never turned back, never looked back, never came back to the Jedi Order. So that's kind of in a nutshell, everything that happened here. So Jonesy, I'm going to start with you, I guess, on that first question. And I want to talk specifically about Ahsoka and Anakin's relationship, and how much do you feel like Ahsoka was inspired, influenced by Anakin Skywalker, his demeanor, his behaviors, attributes, right, his leadership, and then vice versa. How much do you feel like in the Clone Wars she influenced him? Because I think there was a little bit of give and take there for both of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think her ability to think on her feet and be able to be more dynamic with decision making, attribute a lot of that to Anakin. I mean, those were really important lessons to learn, right? And taking care of the people around you. And I think it's difficult to mention Anakin but not mention Rex as well, because I think, if anything, she may have learned just as much from Rex, or maybe even more from Rex, with loyalty and commitment to to really just a family almost. But I think a lot of that stemmed from Anakin. I think what we got from Tales of the Jedi was also really interesting too, of that vulnerability of Anakin to her also paid dividends later on for her as she starts to take care of the people around her, especially when you get to Rebels, and when she's getting shot over and over and over. And the best thing that he can do is to make sure that she can take care of herself and protect herself and be better so that she can survive, because that's the one thing he can't always do for her. And so a lot of life lessons for her in that respect, and a lot of things that, get brought in throughout her arc in very in various ways. But I think with Anakin, I think the core of who she is, you really do see it in that. But it's also at the same time, that's also the negative effect of where she is too, right? And when you talk about, the Wrong Jedi in particular, which was season 5, episode 20, when she leaves the Order, when she's accused of the wrongdoing and she loses faith. I mean, those are the types of things that even her master turned her back on her, to an extent. I mean, he was trying to work for her, but there was a certain element where she wasn't sure that he had her back and that he believed her. And so I think a lot of that doubt and self-doubt and lack of faith that the Jedi Order, also stems to Anakin as a reflection of him in some ways, despite them still having clearly a really strong bond and a really important bond between them.
Mm-hmm. So, Lauren, I guess for Ahsoka Tano, what's your relationship with her? Like, is she a character that you, and I don't know, honestly, it's a very sincere question. How much do you like this character? What do you think about her arc, I guess, in the Clone Wars? And then do you have anything else to add, I guess, regarding her relationship either to Anakin Skywalker or Jonesy made a great point, the influence. I mean, she almost looks at Rex, especially when we get to the later series here in the Star Wars Rebels. It's almost like a grandfather kind of relationship or a father relationship, even though it's never, said that. But she does look up to him. And one other thing, too, I want to quickly mention, there is that line that was used both in that Clone Wars movie, and then it came back in Rebels about Rex saying, in my experience, or, experience weighs more than, years or age or whatever the line is.
Yeah, I think it was rank.
Yeah, that's it. And and I just wondered too if how much of that, it'd be great if we got that in the next series. But anyway, so what was I guess your thoughts on Ahsoka Tano and then the relationships that she built in the Clone Wars?
Yeah, so I definitely feel connected to this character, especially just almost kind of like growing up with her, watching the Clone Wars, and I'm sure a lot of people who were kids when that show first started on Cartoon Network and continued growing up with it could relate to that feeling as well, because we're seeing her mature and learn and grow as she's going through these different trials throughout the series.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as her and Anakin's influence on each other, I mean, what Jonesy said was exactly what I was going to say about the way that she is able to just think quick on her feet and kind of like get out of situations in unconventional ways. That to me has Anakin written all over it. And in addition to that as well, I mean, I feel like she has had a really big influence on him too, because she kind of grounds him in a way. And she's almost kind of like his voice of reason a lot of times. So
that's a great
for
point.
her to be that voice of reason and then for that to be broken when their relationship is influenced by her being wrongly accused, I feel like that played a big role in Anakin losing faith, kind of losing his footing and everything that came after that. So those two characters are just really closely connected because they both kind of helped each other and at times hurt each other too, and that had long-lasting impacts.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the few things Yoda ever got right in his life by pairing. I'm kidding. That's a joke. But you got to give Yoda props because he was the one that did this. He pulled that on Anakin Skywalker because I mean it was very clear he did not want a Padawan. He was almost like in that whole conversation, he was almost talking like, well, I'm never going to have kids, right? Kind of thing is really the way I interpreted that conversation. And yet here he goes, he gets her. And we saw that early on. You brought up a good point about her ability to think on her feet. We see that from the very first scene that we see her, and if not the second scene, and continues to the Clone Wars and continues to Rebels. I'm sure it's going to continue as we get into the new series as well. Morai is the Convor. You said that we had an appearance of it. Is that been official? Because I know some people, I'm saying live action appearance.
Yeah, why does it have to be official? Yeah, she was definitely in The Jedi in The Mandalorian season 2. You see in the back. So. You see the Convor up on the branch.
Okay. I remember talking about it, but I just don't remember it being that
like
convincing.
The comic books. That's officially like a cameo, maybe not a full first appearance. If you want to split hairs, I'll split that with you if you want.
Right. Well, I had the question about whether or not we would actually see the live action one in the Ahsoka series, and I don't know how you can do an Ahsoka series and not have that thing pop up, even if it is I mean, imagine it would be something more than what we got in that episode of The Jedi, right? Than just in the background. I'd like this similar to what we saw at the very end of season 7 of Clone Wars, where Vader's looking up and he sees it circling. I mean, it was very apparent that was it. I guess another little bit of trivia there too. That Convor is rumored, speculated to be the daughter in some way. I think that there were times when she would take that form, and of course that was, where she got it, where Ahsoka got her life. So, maybe it is. Maybe she's got a higher power that's looking out for her outside of the Force as well. Okay, but so Jonesy, more serious question. She leaves the Jedi Order. Do you think at any point during this new series, are we going to get her having some kind of a discussion with any character, and you can pick who that might be, where she's talking about leaving the Jedi Order, how that made her feel, and then more importantly, like, what do you think she considers herself these days? And we've kind of talked about it. She's never explicitly said what she is, outside of "I am no Jedi." I think during the Marquez run on the Clone Wars, or the Martez sisters, sorry. We were talking about how, and they said it as much in the episode, that even though she doesn't call herself a Jedi, she still acts like a Jedi. And I think a lot of people walked away from that series, or that small segment of episodes, thinking that she is probably closer to the Jedi than any of the Jedi had ever been during the prequel trilogy, right? So what do you think she is at this point? And I mean, and I had the Wayseeker in here. A Wayseeker is from the High Republic. Do you think she fits that kind of a mold?
She fits elements of it, but I still don't know that I don't know that that's really her. But I mean, it's so hard not to call her a Jedi, because I'm with you. I think that she's actually she embodies the truer nature of what the Jedi wanted to be, or maybe even thought they were, than any Jedi that really has been around her in her era, I think. Mm-hmm. And especially now, I think maybe Luke in that regard too. But to go back to your original question though, of like, is she going to give us any kind of clarity around this, or what she was, what her belief system is, or go back and touch on her leaving of the Jedi Order? I really hope so. Especially, I think where the context might come out is with a conversation with Sabine about where they went when they left the epilogue of Rebels, and what's gone on since then, and what that journey for Ahsoka specifically looks like. Now, what I can see, I think the issue with some of that is that you have to break down some of the walls that Ahsoka has built up. I think, and we've seen a little bit of this. We saw a little bit in The Mandalorian. We've seen a little bit in Book of Boba Fett, in those scenes with Luke and Din. So again, she does want to keep everyone a bit at arm's length and a bit of that distance, so she doesn't get brought back too far into it again. So she still believes in it, but doesn't necessarily want to. She doesn't want to commit to it. So, and again, I understand why the Wayseeker continues to pop up in that regard, but I don't know. It's still difficult not to call her a Jedi when she's probably the most Jedi-like character we have in Star Wars in this era.
Yeah. Lauren, for you, quick question on this, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I was just thinking about this. Like, in the High Republic, do you feel like she aligns with more of the Jedi from that era, or any Jedi in particular? I think someone in the chat, I think it was Gary, said that he said the only Jedi like her was really Qui-Gon Jinn. I can see similarities there. But any other Jedi that kind of come to mind in that High Republic era that fit this kind of a mold that we see Ahsoka in?
Well, I would say if I had to compare her to any High Republic Jedi, I probably would say Orla Jareni, just because I feel like some of their
outlook... Who was a Wayseeker. Sorry.
Was a Wayseeker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, some of their outlook was very similar, and just kind of like the way they went about things, I feel like they have some things in common, just to give a concise answer.
Yeah.
But I almost wonder if, for her to call herself a Wayseeker, it's hard for me to conceptualize being a Wayseeker in the absence of like the council even existing, because the nature of a Wayseeker is that they are a Jedi, but they just don't operate under the authority of the council. They can kind of do their own thing within reason. So if there's no council, is she truly a Wayseeker? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I almost wonder if like part of the journey of this show is going to be like, I think when we start the show, I suspect that she does not see herself as a Jedi at all. But I wonder if she's going to kind of come to terms with like, I can still be a Jedi. And even though the Order didn't live up to what I needed from them, that doesn't mean that I can't be a Jedi anymore. So that's just kind of like long-term theories, I guess.
Yeah, I like that. I can see that going that direction, actually. And you're right. There are certain aspects. I think the big telltale sign, or I guess the common aspect between Orla Jareni and Ahsoka, and even Qui-Gon Jinn, is they kind of do follow the Force, right? They're not beholden to the strict rules, the dogma of a lot of things. They go where their heart leads them. They go where where the Force leads their heart, kind of thing. So in that regard, I think there's probably a similar trait and commonality between all of them. So let's wrap up the Clone Wars era with a couple other things. So we'll get into the Siege of Mandalore. Thanks for putting the episodes in here, by the way, Jonesy. So season 7, episodes 9 through 12, that was where she and Bo-Katan led the forces that went into Mandalore to liberate Mandalore from Darth Maul and Death Watch, who had pretty much occupied the main city there at that point. There was also, she had a very epic battle, one of the really great battles in Star Wars, like choreography wise, in that episode as well, where she did defeat Darth Maul, though she didn't kill him. She did subdue him. He was eventually captured, prisoned, and we got that real cool like Iron Maiden prison that the Mandalorians had used. I mean, that was a really kind of wicked thing. Right. So we got to see all of that, and then that whole series really ends with, you talked about earlier where they were on the battle on that it was one of the Star Destroyers or the cruisers, or forget,
Venator class or whatever.
Yeah, it was the Venator class. Yeah. Yep. And that series really just kind of ends where she and Rex kind of fake their deaths and have these little tombstones there. She has that really great moment in that episode where they're just holding on her face, and then they kind of pan down to the lightsabers, and you can slowly see them starting to like she's letting go, and like literally letting go of everything at this point. Lets the lightsabers go because she really needs those to be there to kind of, really make sure that people get the idea that she died and her lightsabers were left there. But the one thing that I walked away from all of this with, especially at the very end of that episode, is, I mean, she's already lost the Jedi Order at that point, because she had lost the Jedi Order because she had walked away. But at this point, she's really lost just about everything. She's walking away from everything, doesn't know where to go. All of her family is gone for the most part. I mean, in her head, everybody's gone, right? Her whole family was that Jedi Order. Her whole personality, her character was all defined by the Clone Wars. She came in at such an early age, and it felt like this thing lasted, it only lasted, I think, a couple of years or whatever in real time, but she's so much older by the time we get to that. And for her to walk away from all of that, I just wondered just how much of that identity was lost to her. And, especially as somebody who was kind of born into war as a general, as a Jedi at such a very early age.
Yeah, and I think this is where when you talk about other essential material to understand Ahsoka's journey in total, this is why the Ahsoka novel was so important. I know we're going to talk about it, but that's why it's so important, because you do pick up right from that moment and you see where she was at. I think Clone Wars did a little bit of this after she left the Order when we came back around into season 7. But again, I think she loses it all again, especially when she has to say goodbye to Rex, when everything crumbles around with Order 66. I mean, so these are just really, she has to go and reinvent herself. And you see why I mentioned the walls have kind of come up around her, especially when we're in the Mandalorian era, but really just a lot of this, this 10-year period, 20-year period, you can just tell why all of these things these have all happened to her. And a lot of times she's the one who's been on the really straight and narrow path. She's been the one true Jedi in a lot of ways, and staying true to who she is, her own core values, as well as trying to take care of everyone around her. But, those events, I think, probably really broke her. And I hope we do get some insight into, like, kind of an official canon perspective of this, because while the book was really good, it's not officially canon anymore. And we get a little bit of some Tales of the Jedi, but I would really love for us to actually get more exposition of this, or at least a story, some comments. Again, something that just gives us a little better flavor of how she views that experience and how she's valued that experience, or what she's learned from it, just whatever that total picture looks like for her. Because I think it's really important to understand where Ahsoka's at when we meet her in The Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett, and presumably in Ahsoka in the new series, to understand where she is in that moment. These are the moments we really have to have more brought to life. And I think this is where the series could really do a favor to the fans, especially the new people coming in to watch it, to help her understand why she's a little bit grumpy, why she's a little bit distant, because they've not really explained any of that type stuff yet. And I think this would really behoove them to give them just a little nugget there to help people bring them up to speed, without saying, well, go watch Rebels season 4 or whatever, which doesn't always help you either. Even though it's a big part of it. I think this is a really crucial part of the time, because she's so impressionable still at this age. She knows who she is, but she's still figuring it all. She's still putting it all together, right? Because she's still in a very impressionable age. Yeah,
and she's having to rebuild her life literally from scratch.
On her own. I mean, now like you said before, she didn't even have the family, and she doesn't have Rex, and they know they have to go underground, and you just have to make your way. And while she has the tools to do it, you're right, man. That's it, completely rebuilding, and you're 16, 17 years old, whatever it is at the time.
Yeah.
Not easy, just despite her ability.
Yeah, and all of this is, again, although not technically canon anymore because they've kind of changed some things. E.K. Johnson's Ahsoka novel has got a lot of this, and I think she does a good job of setting the stage for Ahsoka's next chapter in her life. I guess some of the bigger highlights from that book was she's pretty much laying low. I think we saw this in Tales of the Jedi. She's kind of taking these jobs, these like hopping around from different planets, and what's very apparent is that the Empire is up to something, right? They're doing something, and the spoiler is that they're massing food and water and all kinds of supplies that they need in order to build this Death Star that's going to have thousands and thousands of people living on it. Sorry for the spoiler there, but so she takes this name of Ashla, right? Pretty close to Ahsoka, I guess.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, it does sound familiar, right? That she would pick that name of all people, but Ashla, she ends up working for this clan called the Fardis, and it's Fardis. This clan that they're kind of farmers and stuff, and she gets into all kinds of shenanigans because the Empire shows up, and similar to what we saw with Kenobi, she's trying to not show herself as a Jedi, but that itch is there, and it does come out like we saw in the Kenobi series, and eventually she does give, she's eventually does use her powers and her Force abilities. The Inquisitors find out, they end up meeting with her, and she ends up killing the sixth brother. This is where she takes the crystals out of there, purifies them, makes them white, puts them into the new hilts that she's been carrying around and building from like pieces of stuff that she's just collected over the years since she left the Jedi Order. And so we get her two lightsabers now with the white blades. And then the other thing that kind of came out of that book, and this is at the very end, we get the origin of Fulcrum, where she becomes that first Fulcrum agent. She's working very closely with Bail Organa, and the whole Rebel Alliance. She's kind of like that. She's coordinating and setting up meetings with people that could be very beneficial to the Rebel Alliance, or the birthing Rebel Alliance. Saw Gerrera's a part of this as well, but she is that first Fulcrum, which is why at Rebels, when we see the Fulcrum symbol, it is kind of like the markings on her head, right? Which, now in retrospect, you think, wow, that's probably a dead giveaway for anybody. But everybody presumed that she was dead at that point. So Lauren, I think for all of that, at least in the books, for the stuff that came out of the books, is there anything that you feel like you'd want to see in the new Ahsoka series? And I think that one of the other questions, too, is how much do you think we're going to get on her backstory? I think they've done a pretty consistent job with these most recent stories, whether it be the Book of Boba Fett or The Mandalorian, where they do the flashbacks and we get more context on the character. Do you think they would try to do something like that? And would they leverage anything from the books to help kind of build her character ahead of the series?
Well, to add on to what y'all were saying about the Ahsoka novel, something that novel does really well that connects back to what Jonesy was saying specifically about how Ahsoka is much more different or much more distant by the time that we see her in Mandalorian, is that in the Ahsoka novel, every time she gets close to anybody, it kind of ends up blowing up in her face and she ends up endangering people.
Right.
And so I would like to see that touched on in the show as well, because I feel like that piece is key to why she becomes distant. Because when we see her in Clone Wars, she's a very warm person. She's, very friendly. She has lots of friends. Lots of people like her for the most part. And so like seeing her be distant in Mandalorian, it feels very different. And I think that's part of the reason why some people, when they see this new portrayal of Ahsoka, they kind of have a hard time connecting because there is a difference. But if that difference is explained and connected back to how in the Ahsoka novel and in other material that we have, when she gets close to people, it's very dangerous for those people. I think that all of that would make a lot more sense. So I think that would be something that would be pretty easy to touch on in the show that would really help make that connection very effectively.
Yeah, because you don't really have to dwell on it either, right? It can be in a really short scene or a really short piece of dialogue, just to get that out there and have people understand it. At least it puts the idea in people's minds, the viewers' minds, without you really having to go and elaborate too deeply on it, just to get an idea of where they're at. And we all understand this because we've all felt this way in one form or fashion or another. So it's usually something very relatable for an audience, I think. So that's a great point.
All right, let's move into the Rebels content, where I think there's quite a bit here. And this is, like to what Lauren said, this is a very friendly, kind of glowing Ahsoka, right? She's been living now for quite a while, since the end of the Empire, or I guess the start of the Empire at this point. And she's teased midway, I think, through season 1, if my memory serves me correct. At the very end of that first season, we get the big reveal that she is Fulcrum, and she's kind of been. And there was moments in there where she was talking, and you really couldn't, like, she was like this shadowy figure. She was using a voice changer to kind of hide her name, her voice, and that sort of thing. But we do find out that she is. And then for all of season 2, she's pretty much a very main character in season 2. She does come back a little bit later as well, and she kind of dips in and out. And she has her biggest part later down the road when we get to the World Between Worlds. But also in here, we cannot talk about the season finale of season 2, which is Twilight of the Apprentice, which I still say is like some of the best Star Wars television, Star Wars period out there. And it really just kind of revolves around the Ahsoka confronting Anakin Skywalker or Darth Vader, however you want to interpret that. At Malachor, they have a pretty epic battle. She does wound him. She sees his face for the first time. You know, she knows that's her master at that point. She's kind of putting everything. I mean, I think she had her suspicions, but it was pretty much confirmed for her in that moment, especially at the very end. And you know, that episode left on quite a bit of a cliffhanger, because she's almost getting crushed by this fallen temple on Malachor, and we don't know her fate. We later see her kind of just very, I don't even know what the word is, but she's just kind of walking off like into the shadows of a cave, and you're thinking, what the heck just happened to her? How did she live and everything? But it also, we can talk about the World Between Worlds just now too. That's the other significant part here, where they come across what we can only pick or talk about being some kind of a, I don't even know how you would describe this, a portal device mechanism, whatever it is. And we're going to have a whole show on this at some point, probably here in the next month.
A juncture of the space-time continuum?
Yeah, for Star Wars, right? And I know it's a very controversial topic, but the idea here is that you can kind of go back and see different points in time, and we see where they actually manipulate time a little bit later, where Ezra saves her from that battle between her and Anakin. So he almost goes back in time, pulls her out, saves her. And what that does in, you know, the time continuum, or what that changed, we don't know. They've never really explored that. But it is significant, because I think a lot of what we've seen, at least aesthetically, seems to be implying that they maybe have, so there may be some connection to the World Between Worlds. I think I've thrown out a billion theories, and so has Jonesy, about how they would tie those two together. But Jonesy, I guess any thoughts on Twilight of the Apprentice in terms of her character development there? And then World Between Worlds, has your opinion changed on whether or not you'd like to see that? And to what extent would you want to see that?
The thing I like about Twilight of the Apprentice, I think just the character moment, I think is one of the most important. I think the most crucial in it is when she tells Anakin, not Vader, but she's actually talking to Anakin, I won't leave you again.
Yeah.
Right. She left him once before. She won't do it again. I think this just speaks so strongly to her character and just where her values are and what's important to her, and that these relationships are important, and that she wants to wrong the rights of the past, because I think it informs her character of what we see at the end of Rebels and what we see in Mandalorian to an extent, right? But I think, kind of like before we talked about, you need some context to bring some of that forward to help. And these are the scars. This is the trauma, right, that she carries with her that inform the character of where she's at now, where the decisions she's making, and her lack of decision making in some cases, or her lack of willingness to get involved, I think, in some areas, or get too involved or too close. Because I think the thing to remember about Rebels was that she was a little bit standoffish too in Rebels for a time. This was a much more serious version of the character than we had, right? So it was a very grown-up version. But so yeah, from Twilight Apprentice, that's kind of that perspective. But for World Between Worlds, I think what's crucial here, and I think this also ties into Ezra, is the lessons of World Between Worlds. This is why this is like essential watching before you go and get into the Ahsoka series when we get this here in a couple months. Because you have to understand both the power of it, but also some of the conversation and the ramifications of your decision making, right? And so to be able to revisit that and understand what Palpatine was trying to get from it, the decisions that Ezra had to make when he pulled Ahsoka out, and when she convinced him not to pull Kanan out, and what that all would mean. So I think those are things that are really important to be able to ground the characters about where they're at. Because I think for Ezra, and we'll talk about Ezra, but I think that's a really important moment for him too, because you talk about informing the character. When you talk about where he ended up with taking Thrawn, it was that experience that helped him make the right decision later on with the Pergil at the very end of the series.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the lesson there was, some things just have, as I don't know, as callous as it may sound, and no pun intended, because there is a callous character in Rebels, but as callous as it sound, some things just have to happen, right? And we're better because of them. We grow from these types of events, and you have to let go. You have to let go of these things. You have to allow fate and destiny to take its place and grow from all of that, right?
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, the Force, the will of the Force, right?
The will of the Force, if you want to, put that in there as well. Yeah, and I wondered too just how much of that we're going to get in the series, because I really think that would be a central point to go back to, like you said, if they do introduce it or bring it into the new series or make it some kind of a centerpiece in the series itself. I think that's a valuable piece of it all, is just what can you do with it and should you do with it, right? We'll see if it really goes there. Lauren, so for the search for Ezra Bridger, I had this question in here about how much do you feel like the way Rebels ends, and we're going to come back to the other characters in just one second, but the way Rebels ends, Sabine has pretty much been given the mission of coming back or finding Ezra. And I think in her last kind of little monologue, she keeps saying the word we. So, I mean, it was implied that her and Ahsoka were looking for Ezra. But my question was really around how much, because in The Mandalorian, it seems like she's very much hyper-focused on Thrawn. And I think we can infer from that, if you find Thrawn, you find Ezra. But it's just weird that they never technically ever brought up Ezra's name. And maybe it's because of the nature of the context that was happening, right? What they were talking about in, why she was on that planet on Corvus and why the battles were going on and all that stuff. That was probably really was just focused around Thrawn. But do you think there's any chance that there's more to it, that she's looking for Thrawn for any other reason other than Ezra? And any thoughts of what that possibly could be?
Yeah, and also with Mandalorian, when she says, "Where is Grand Admiral Thrawn?" it also makes sense to me too that if she said, "Where's Ezra?" to Morgan Elsbeth, she might have been like, "What?" So I mean,
why would I
get
care
it.
about that kid? Right.
So I get it why she said Thrawn, although I suspect, I don't think so. Based on the trailer, the way that she's talking about the heir to the Empire and all this, to me, it also seems like she's interested in Thrawn because it could at least lead her to Ezra, or at least lead her to her next clue for Ezra. But also because I expect Thrawn is going to be a pretty big threat at this time. And she's probably, to her knowledge, one of the only people that actually can do anything about it. And so I could see that being enough of a motivation for her to get involved again. Because we know this about her character, that she, even though she tries to not get involved, she still gets involved. Like, she can't help herself, for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. So I could see it being a combination of those two things. She wants to find Ezra, but finding Ezra is only going to be a piece of what she is trying to accomplish.
And I love that this would be the dissonance between Ahsoka and Sabine, right? Because they're coming from very different perspectives here. The aspect of family is so important to Sabine, where Ahsoka has been so disconnected from that for so long that she doesn't necessarily have that. It's more about the mission. It's more about the threat. It's more about kind of the Jedi way of thinking. It's more about the galaxy and taking care of this, what the potential of that would be, where Sabine is very much, I need to do what's right by my family. I need to bring them back. And I like that that's the disconnect. And maybe that we get more background as to why they separated and why there's this tension that we see in the trailer, because of they have different goals now of what they were in it for. And over time that became, and probably very quickly, that became very apparent. And that's where they started to just have a rub of what's most important to you. And that's where that dissonance comes from.
Yeah. There's, and throughout the Rebels series, she has a number of she has great relationships with just about every character, there. I love her relationship with Kanan Jarrus. Of course, we won't see that because he died. Spoiler. But they had a really good relationship, as well as Hera. And, I know, Jonesy, you had listed a couple of different episodes in here that you can kind of go back to kind of touch on and kind of get caught up. But you listed Hera's heroes as one of them. And for Hera specifically, because we get her background. We get to know about the Killikori, which is that little ancient, I forget what it was, like the beads thing that was like a family heirloom kind of thing. It was a family tree, essentially. And what was really great about that was we learned that was really, I mean, we'd already talked about it in a couple of episodes, and if you read any of the Thrawn novels, you're probably aware of it, but just how much he dedicates himself to studying the art and culture of people. And it really played front and center in that episode because he was able to really see through what Hera was trying to do, which she was trying to portray herself as this peasant lady. And he knew that Corey meant something, and he was able to kind of read it and understand that was actually hers. And so it's just that he is kind of he's built differently. He's cut from a different kind of cloth. He's not like your standard Imperial commander, admiral, whatever the rank is. But what other episodes did you want to kind of talk about or highlight here, where people can go back and get caught up on some of the other Rebels cast members that probably will play a big role here in the new series?
Yeah, like I said, Hera's Heroes, that's season 3, episode 5. And again, you really do get a good flavor. It's a good introduction to Thrawn. It's really essential watching, and you said it really well, just to give you that baseline of why this character is different and how are they different and why is that really important and how does that really change the dynamic in the game that's going on between Rebel and Empire, to just kind of boil it down to more simple things. Rebel Assault and Jedi Knight are also really good in season 4. Episodes 9 and 10, that's the end of the season, of course. So again, really powerful moments there. Just again, more Hera, but also it's all about Thrawn. Everything goes crazy. So it's just, it's kind of required watching. And if you really want to get informed about Sabine in particular, and you want to dig into her history, especially her time with the Empire, you're looking at Heroes of Mandalore. So that's a 2-parter, season 4, episodes 1 and 2. And then even Antilles Extraction is really good. Season 3, episode 4. Really good. You do get the Wedge Antilles, kind of cameo, if you will, or that aspect of it. But again, you really talk about what goes into Sabine's past, the dirty side of Sabine's past, and the shame that goes along with it. And you start, I think why those are important when you look at the Ahsoka series is because then you start to say, okay, why, when we look and she's kind of dejected, she carries a lot of these other things with her. Is very much like Ahsoka. All of these experiences are weighing her in a certain way, and in these traumatic events and, life and decisions that she's made and the atonements that she's tried to make. But when you fail and when you feel like you've let someone down or you've not been able to fulfill your promise, especially to a friend or a family member or a potential love interest, like Albert wants these two to be, then all of those other things matter a whole lot more all of a sudden. And so from a viewer, I think those really help us understand, what are the things going through the character's head, especially if you want to read too much into this stuff like 3 of us do. Those things really start to be important because you start to understand what are all the things going through the character's head. And that really makes you empathize more with them because, again, we've all been there in some capacity, right? I did it again. Why am I such a failure? Why am I doing this? And you understand why you get stuck in this rut, why you get stuck in your room. And you feel paralyzed in some kind of way. And so I hope some of that comes out. You don't need all of that, but I hope some of that comes out to help viewers. But if not, definitely those, especially Heroes of Mandalore, are really important to go back and hear that. So episodes 1 and 2 of season 4 are really critical.
Yeah, it's good stuff, especially if you've caught the Mandalorian bug and just Mandalorian culture and want to kind of see some of the backstory there. It's really great. They do get into that. You get to meet Sabine's parents, kind of understand where they're coming from, the current state of Concordia and Mandalore itself. It's prior to what we get to in the Mandalorian. So
they're great
really,
Bo-Katan primers too. If you wanted to go back and rewatch Mandalorian, those are great episodes to get you loaded up for Bo-Katan's injection into Mandalorian and live stream. Live action.
Live action. Yeah. So $1 million question, Lauren. Sorry, just the way the cards played on this one. The Bendu. I know Jonesy had it in here as a bonus episode or bonus kind of topic. I want to talk about it because I think it's such a great character. But do you think we're going to see the Bendu and Ahsoka at all?
I mean, I feel bad taking this one from Jonesy. I feel like Jonesy is just absolutely dying to say it first.
No, please,
Jonesy,
go ahead.
what do you think?
I yield.
You
my
can make
time.
it yes or no. Yes or no.
I yield my time to the lady from the Midwest.
I want to hear what Jonesy. I want to hear it.
So for transparency, this is what I have in the notes: the Bendu, and in the parentheses, hey, just in case.
Okay, I'll take this answer, you chickens.
Well, this is what,
Yes.
This is, all right, yeah. So this is 0 Hour, season 3, episodes 21 and 22, right? And again, this is the real critical, and this is when the Bendu kind of goes crazy, and so Thrawn is finding out he's not so smart, or there's things that he doesn't understand and doesn't comprehend. That's a part about this I really like. There's character development moments all over the place.
Sure.
But what I like about the Bendu again is that there is something else out there, and I think where this maybe comes into play with Ahsoka is that there is something else out there that can influence events that are outside of Ahsoka's control, and maybe she learns more about. It's really hard to get the Bendu in this series, not gonna lie. But I also knew if I didn't say it, I'd probably regret it, especially if it showed up. So, this is our style. We just throw everything against the wall.
CYA,
See
man.
what
Yep.
happens.
We'll get something right here eventually. I like this. So I was trying to think about like how you could incorporate this. And even if he never said they were the Bendu, the fact that maybe she's consulting with other entities, whether it be, Force ghosts, whether, Anakin, maybe Kenobi, whoever she's talking to, if she's somehow in tune in speaking with these entities and looking to people to speak to people about guidance and that sort of thing, this is a character that maybe she connects with and looks up at in that regard. But, and for anybody that doesn't know, the Bendu is kind of like this mysterious, I mean, some people have said that it could be a celestial, but it is kind of like this force entity that can manifest itself in different forms, super powerful. Thrawn ends up kind of, quote, killing it in Rebels, although it's clear that it didn't actually kill it. I mean, he hit it with a bunch of laser bolts or blaster bolts or whatever it was. I think he had one of the Star Destroyers firing on it or whatever it was that killed him. But I mean, even after that, it's very clear that this thing is still alive. So it's not something you can just go kill, physically. But it is some kind of a force being, God-like figure, very similar to the father, the mother, or sorry, the father, the daughter, and the son in that regard. So I don't know. It feels far-fetched, but
Yeah. That was the reason I was being avoidant, is because I felt like I was being a downer. I think it's just going to be too much. I don't expect to see it.
That's
they're
reality.
going to open
Yep.
season 1, episode 1 with the Bendu talking.
So the parallels though with both is, so Bendu is the one in the middle, right? That's the big quote from the Bendu. But what I like about it is that the Bendu always wants to rise above all of the other problems going on and doesn't want to get involved. And you have Ahsoka that has a little bit of that, but also that Jedi tendency that rubs Bendu the wrong way. Mm-hmm. So there's that conflict. And this was a really great conflict between the Bendu and Kanan. And if we view Ahsoka and Kanan similarly in any kind of way, introducing that conflict and having it is really cool. I'm with you, Lauren. I think like this is next to zero for this to happen, but it was just, if they found a way of having any kind of reference, I would lose my what if they did it, because it's just, I mean, how much fun is it to say that you're the one in the middle? I'm sorry, it's just fun.
I'm
A
going with
reference
70.
would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah, a reference would be cool. Yeah. I'm going with 77% chance that the Bendu will show up.
Wow.
All
Oh
in.
my gosh.
I'm going to go with 99% chance you're wrong.
You're probably right. Probably right. Okay, so Lauren, the real question for you is about family. So Rebel, and Jonesy kind of alluded to this in just a little bit ago, but Rebels is so hyper focused on the concept of family, and the family is who you make of them to be, right? It doesn't have to be your blood family. It can be anybody that you choose to call family. But for Ahsoka, she never really had that, right? She had the Jedi Order. She lost them. She had Anakin, lost him in a couple different ways. Lost Kenobi. The Marquez sisters are out there. That would be the closest thing I would think that she would probably still have at this point. Rex is still out there. Of course, he was separated, and now of course they're back. But do you think that we'll get? I guess, do you think that Ahsoka saw the Rebels family as her family, as an extension of that family? And do you think that'll play into the new series in any way?
It's hard to say. I mean, because if we're comparing the Rebels family to Clone Wars family, I mean, I feel like there is a difference there with the Rebels family. It's like Jonesy was saying earlier. We're already feeling a little bit of the distance with her, where in Clone Wars, she seemed like she was much more willing to get close to people. So I think they're probably the closest thing to family that she has, but I almost wonder if she's still keeping them at arm's length, because when we pick back up on the trailer with Ahsoka and Sabine, they seem like they haven't spoken in a very long time. So family for me, it might be stretching it a little bit, but I don't think there's anyone that she's closer to than them.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't think of anyone else outside of, again, there might be a group of clones out there, right, that were part of the 501st outside of Gregor and those guys, and that she's been, in contact with. I mean, I figure Cody, Rex, those people are probably all in cahoots with her at this point if they're still around. I don't know if Rex has been officially announced. I hope I don't spoil anything here, but I think there's been pictures of him already out there. I think he's going to reprise that role here in the new series. Hopefully that's not a spoiler. If it was, sorry, we'll edit that out.
I like the idea that there's an opportunity to reintroduce family to Ahsoka.
I think she needs it. I think she needs it again. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I agree with you, and I think Lauren's spot on here with too. Is that I think she's just so distant from it, and she's so focused on the mission. There needs to be something to bring her back into the fold, and regain that humanity side of her, that caring aspect of the Jedi. Well, I guess you could say that lack of empathy that the Jedi that she kind of trained her, and she's kind of gone overboard a little bit, and so bring that empathy back and allow the character to grow in that way, so the character doesn't get stale and stagnant. I think that's what the Rebels team, as they come back together, and we know this from some of the interviews that have gone on, that they're going to have to refamiliarize themselves with one another, what it means to reintegrate as a family. And I would love to see Ahsoka resist, but ultimately want to be and give in to a piece of that, even if it's just a little. It doesn't have to be a huge move or a huge shift, but it would be great to see her move in and embrace it to an extent. I think it would be great for the character. I think it would be great. It would be great to see that movement for Ahsoka as a character, which feels like it hasn't moved, like the character hasn't moved a whole lot for us in that emotional journey in a long time. So I think it would be great to actually have that finally happen, and this is the time for that to occur.
I agree. I'd love to see her reconnect with someone at some point, because she does feel a bit lost. She does feel, I hate to use the word damage, but she's been through a lot. She's seen a lot of trauma, and she does feel very different, almost jaded in some way. Although I think she still has, I think she still has the Jedi side to her. She is still caring and loving, and she's going to stick up for the person that's, down. None of that has gone away, but you're right. It doesn't, there's just a slight edge to her now, and hopefully they explore that, because that's very interesting for this character to kind of get there, given what we've already talked about.
And I hear Luke is single, so if she opens up to it.
Oh, no.
Well, we'll talk about Luke here in a second. Speaking of which, let's move into the next section. No, we're not talking about him in that regard. Let's move into hang up. Look at you.
What's the spicy? What's the spicy rating, Albert?
Child of the 90s. I'm going to hang up. Listen to her. So we're going to go to The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett. So she made appearances, I guess, technically in both of these. For the first one, it was the Jedi Season 2, Episode 5. This is where she meets Grogu. She talks to Grogu. This is where we found out Grogu's name. Very interesting conversation that we don't really know a whole lot about. We don't know to what level she was able to communicate with Grogu. She is, of course, the one that recommended that Din take him to Tython, take Grogu to Tython, put him on the Seeing Stone, or what was that stone called?
Stone.
Was it? Okay. Stone. Yeah, put him on the Seeing Stone, and a Jedi would come, which I always wondered, did she know Luke Skywalker would show up at that point? Or was it, could it have been another Jedi? I don't know. We're not going to get into that right now. But
she thought it was going to be Mace Windu.
Oh, look at that. Shots fired. Shots fired. Okay, listen. No.
It's my turn to hang up.
You two need to, okay, just calm down. This is about to get it's going to escalate here. But then we also get her battling Magistrate Morgan Elsbeth. So great conversation between those two. We get kind of her true intentions as to why she's in the freaking series, which is to find Thrawn. So they have a great battle. She ends up winning. And Elsbeth wasn't killed, right? So presumably we're going to see more of her in the next series, I would imagine, at some point. And then we got From the Desert Comes a Stranger, which is from Book of Boba Fett, Season 1, Episode 6. And this is where we get that relationship with Luke Skywalker. They have a relationship of some sort. It does appear that, at least my take on it, again, this is pure speculation and how I interpret it, but it did feel like Luke Skywalker looked up to her as a master, someone with a lot of experience. I mean, he was almost like a little boy again, like Anakin Skywalker saying, please don't go, when she was about to turn and walk away. I think we've spent some time to kind of talking about already during the course of that episode breakdown about what that relationship was like. What did they talk about? How did they meet? Did they ever have a conversation about Anakin Skywalker? Did they ever have a conversation about, Leia being his sister, and the Force sensitivity there. We don't know how much of that came up, and I don't know that we're going to get a lot of that, honestly, in this series. So let me kind of lead in with that. I guess Jonesy, for you, I guess her relationship with Luke Skywalker, how did you interpret that? What do you think that is right now? And then if you had, whack some conversations that they may have, what do you think they probably have had a conversation about?
I think the conversation is probably about the Jedi of her era, right, and what that was. And I think maybe both the positive and the negative that go along with it. Ahsoka seems like she would be pretty transparent in many of those ways. I imagine that she probably did share some about Anakin as well, and some of the things. And she kind of throws him a bone in that way, much like your father. And I think in a positive way, in an encouraging way. But I think also there's a distance there too. And again, you see the theme developing, right? Of Ahsoka is hesitant to get too involved. Let other people make their own decisions, make their own calls, let them research and come to their own conclusions on what they're wanting to build. And I think with Luke, that's probably very important, because I think to an extent, Ahsoka probably feels responsible a bit for how the Jedi went and how Order 66, and doesn't necessarily want to influence some of that. So I think, again, within the context of the Ahsoka series, probably not going to get a whole lot of that. But it would be interesting if we did get a little sampling of maybe what her influence is on the Jedi of now versus her historical aspect and views of that, and what the influence and what the conversations with Luke have been, because I think some of them probably took place, but I imagine she stopped short quite a bit. And that might be why Luke is so eager, of course, to connect with her and talk with her, because he just doesn't get a whole lot from her.
Right.
But he knows there's a lot there. And you're right. He's kind of, I don't want to say desperate, but Luke is very much worried and scared that he's not doing enough. He's not doing the right thing. He's not, maybe not strong enough or powerful enough, but just, he has that self-doubt, right? Because he's the only one. That's a lot of pressure. And Ahsoka is there to kind of walk him through and guide. But aside from holding his elbow every once in a while, she needs to step away and pull back and go off on her own path. Mm-hmm. And not influence his too much. And so I think that's an important dynamic of the relationship that keeps them at least arm's length, if not further away.
Yeah, I like the idea of her allowing Luke to kind of make these decisions on his own, giving him just what he needs, but not trying to steer him in any way, because I think she probably does feel like, hey, the Jedi Order conceptually is not a bad thing. It's just, it strayed too far away, and I don't want to taint that. I don't want to persuade that in any way. Allow him to kind of build it, very innocently from the ground up, the way it was meant to be, and see where it goes from there. Provide advice here and there should he need it. Lauren, do you think at any point, I want to get back to the Leia question here, because I think that's always intriguing. I mean, of course they've met. Bail Organa did such a good job and went out of his way to ensure that nobody ever found out that Leia was Anakin Skywalker's daughter. And even in the Ahsoka novel, right, he never mentions to Ahsoka anything about where Leia came from. He just said that's somebody he trusts, and they had a working relationship. So I don't think there was really a question about whether they met or they know each other. But do you think at any point, either through conversations with Bail Organa, through Fulcrum, or do you think any conversations with Luke Skywalker specifically, that this topic came up, that she would be one of the very inner circle people that would know Leia's secret?
I think that through conversations with Luke, I think it would have come out, because I suspect that there probably were more conversations going on about Anakin, because I think that could be part of the reason why Luke felt so connected to her, is because she's one of the only people, or really the only person, who could give him any sort of information about who his dad actually was before he went to the dark side. And I expect Luke would want to know all of as much as he could, based on the way that him and Anakin connected at the end of Return of the Jedi. So I could see Ahsoka being a little bit reserved about how much she's willing to share, but I think whatever she was willing to share, Luke would really take that and really want to know that. So I could see that if they're having some sort of a back and forth conversation about it, I could see Luke telling Ahsoka well, he actually had 2 kids, my sister Leia, blah, blah, blah. So and then also another thing too, just thinking about conversations that the two of them could have had. When I'm thinking about in The Last Jedi, when Luke is telling Rey the Jedi's hubris allowed the Sith to take power, I mean, he's speaking about that with a lot of detail. I wonder if Ahsoka told him that story exactly as it happened from her perspective, and maybe shared more with him about that and exactly how it went down than we really have previously thought of.
Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine he probably picked up something from, stories written, whatever was in the Holocron at the time, or the Holo News at the time, whatever was written or, done at that time. But then, probably confirmation from somebody like Ahsoka, firsthand experience of what that was like, Order 66, the whole 9 yards. I think that would be super beneficial. And I don't think that necessarily, influences his decision about the Jedi Order. I do like what you said, though, also about somebody that really understood him, because you could argue that Kenobi knew Anakin and he had a kind of a different relationship with him. Of course, Ben kind of lied to him too for a while there, to use the whole from a certain point of view thing. So maybe he's not somebody he goes to first. You could argue Yoda as well, though, Yoda wasn't always the biggest fan of Anakin Skywalker at times because of, how rash he was. And, he didn't even want to have him train first. Same thing with Mace Windu. Luke's probably conversing with these folks through the Force, but Ahsoka is so unique because if there was any one person that really saw who Anakin Skywalker was outside of somebody like Padme, it was going to be Ahsoka. So to really get into the head of that character, to get into the head of Anakin Skywalker and not Darth Vader or not the character that was being tainted and persuaded by the dark side, that was definitely Ahsoka. So I think she definitely has some really good insights into the kind, gentle person, that boy that we all knew and loved in episode 1 that never made it past, episode 3.
And it's really interesting, the dynamics about Obi-Wan Kenobi, too, and what she might say and how that informs. I really like this, Lauren. This is a really great thought here of like how that might inform Luke's opinion of how he goes back and looks at Obi-Wan and his influence and his participation in the whole thing, even though Obi-Wan always meant well. Clearly there's some bitterness that came through there, too. So, again, it could be skewing some of the things that Ahsoka shared over time, but I like that's kind of the filter that he may have got some of this from, because you're right, there's some pretty specific detail in there that would she's the primary source where that might come from.
Yeah, and also just, quick little thing to add is that Obi-Wan knew Anakin kind of like a parent, and Ahsoka knew Anakin more like a best friend. So it's like you're getting different sides of him, like through those different accounts, I guess you could say.
Yeah, great point. Yeah.
Yep. Different aspects of his personality and who he was. Okay. So I think that pretty much brings us right up into the Ahsoka series itself. And of course, we've already done a show on this, and we're going to continue to do more shows as trailers come out and footage comes out. And of course, when we get into the episodes, we'll break this down a lot. I threw this question out there earlier, but I guess, Jonesy, is there any reason to think that she would be after? And I asked Lauren this, but I want to ask you and kind of come back to it. Do you think there's any reason why she would be going after somebody like Thrawn versus Ezra? Do you think it's one and the same? What are your thoughts on that? Before I get to the big bonus question, which I didn't ask and don't have in the show notes, and I'm going to surprise you both with.
I think Ahsoka's purpose is Thrawn. I think Sabine's purpose is Ezra. I think it's probably quite clear in that way, where you have that, again, Ahsoka is more mission-driven, greater good, galaxy type of thing, where Sabine and I think Hera might be there a little bit. I think Hera is probably the one who's in both camps, right? I think that's the one, the character that will probably start to skew in both directions and I think she might be the one to be interesting, watch this balance and how she manages Ahsoka and how she manages Sabine. And if she's the one, we already know that she's kind of the matriarch in all of this, especially with the military and everything else. That's just Hera's character throughout Rebels, of course. And I think that's a great character to bring them together and balance each of those objectives, each of those needs, each of those wants, to be able to see what is the right balance of us being able to find this. And again, bringing both of those characters a little bit closer to the middle of where they need to be, and maybe giving that opportunity for Ahsoka specifically for that growth chart that we talked about earlier. So,
yeah.
But I think, going in, though, Ahsoka is very focused on Thrawn, and I think Sabine is very focused on Ezra and probably gives zero cares about Thrawn at this point. It's all about Ezra, and I think Ahsoka is probably the other side of that coin.
Yeah. And we'll get into more of the other characters here as well as we get closer. I kind of want to come back and do kind of like these spotlight type character. I wouldn't call them dissections because they're technically not, but kind of what you need to know going into the series. Maybe we do something with the family as a whole, or maybe we break it out into, because Hera has some works. There is some story there after Rebels, which is the Alphabet Squadron series of books, right? Where she was leading that as the general. So she's been in the war now. She's been in this post Return of the Jedi war for a number of years. And so we may get into some of that here a little bit later. But Okay, last bonus question, and don't worry, it's nothing scary. But Lauren, if you had to pick a favorite series that you had Ahsoka in, whether it be Rebels, the novel, Clone Wars, maybe The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, although there really hasn't been a whole lot there, what do you think you've had your favorite version of Ahsoka so far?
Ooh, okay. So my favorite version of Ahsoka, not my favorite show that contains Ahsoka, right?
Oh, okay. Well, sure. Yes and no.
I think, okay.
Give us both. Give me both. Now I'm intrigued. I want to know what the difference is here.
Well, my favorite version of Ahsoka, I would have to say Clone Wars, because I just love that version of her, the warm version of just kind of her like learning. I just love that side of her.
Yeah.
I think my favorite show that contains Ahsoka is probably Rebels. But I mean, she's a little bit more reserved in that show, so we don't get to see her shine quite as much, in my personal opinion. But just the overall story of Rebels and the way that she plays into that, that's probably like my favorite, aside from the version of her in Clone Wars, if that makes sense.
No, I think it does make sense. I like the way you distinguish those two. What about you, Jonesy? And you can do the same.
Well, no, I'll be more specific. I mean, again, I grew up with the Clone Wars, I think. So the Clone Wars, what I like about that with Ahsoka is you have a complete journey for this character, which is amazing. And again, when you have 7 seasons, and granted, she kind of wasn't in much of season 6, but when you have that much time and you see this kid grow over the course of 5 years or something like that, a lot of opportunity for a lot of great moments and for challenging moments and for self-doubt and for, situations that you don't know how she's going to, partnerships like with Asajj Ventress, right? And having to put things aside and, again, just being able to see, and very much what Lauren said, with the Rebels Ahsoka, a great characterization for that moment in time, but she was very astute, very standoffish for the most part, a bit more driven, a bit more very specific about what her purpose was. And I like the journey of characters. I like seeing them develop. I like seeing them change and grow and have those moments of realization, which the Clone Wars is just so littered with because she was so young and so impressionable going through this really important time in the galaxy as well, and all of these other characters around her. So I think Clone Wars is kind of a clear one for me. And I won't talk about which series. I like Rebels and Clone Wars for different purposes, different reasons. They're very different shows to me, even though it's kind of continuing the story to an extent, kind of like Bad Batch continues the story, but it's very different in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, Clone Wars Ahsoka, I think, is clearly kind of the essential one to really understand, even though things like Twilight of the Apprentice and Shrouds of Darkness, man, killer episodes in Rebels, not to take anything away from those killer episodes.
Yeah, and no surprise, I think mine's Rebels. I get what you guys are saying, and I do love all of the growth aspects
but we're wrong.
But you're wrong, yeah. And I hate to be the one to tell you, no, it's not that. I think it's more about, like, in the Clone Wars, I enjoyed. It was more for me the relationship with her and Anakin Skywalker. It felt like they were kind of one and the same, and you were seeing both of them kind of grow together and go through each other. So it's hard for me to kind of pull that out. And it's probably unfair too. I mean, the Clone Wars is so deep and has so many episodes that when you put that up against something like, The Mandalorian / Book of Boba Fett, well, it's not even close, right? There's just so much more character development because she's featured in so many episodes of the Clone Wars, even if she's not the main character of the episode. But there's something about the Rebels version of her where she's kind of in her prime. Similar to like Luke Skywalker when we saw him at the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian, right? That was Luke in his prime. He was super powerful, very much in control of the Force in a lot of different ways. And we definitely get that from her in Star Wars Rebels. And so while I do appreciate all of the lessons learned and kind of watching her go through that journey, I like seeing that kind of finished product and kind of seeing what she is capable of doing. And I think in some ways, we got a lot of that from the character that we saw in The Mandalorian in Book of Boba Fett, right? And I think we're going to get that same kind of character in the new series, of course. So I'm just excited to see how much she is now really kind of is doing things on her own. What does she call herself, if anything, and how does the Force influence her? Does it guide her? Does she see it as a guiding light more than a will and doing the will of the Force? All of those things are super intriguing. And of course, we don't think we got a lot of it in the Clone Wars. So I just like this new era of her. and these new aspects of her that we get from a very adult, more mature, someone who knows himself better than she did, previously. But I also like Rebels more. So that's
well,
my answer.
and seeing her fight and like just how easily she would dispatch the Inquisitors and things like that. I mean, you couldn't help but just like, wow, this is Luke Skywalker for this generation. It really did feel like that. But you get a little bit of that at Siege of Mandalore too. I think at the very end where she's finally come into Rome against Maul.
I was honestly I was thinking about how to answer this question, and I was going to cheat and say I do to some ways. I feel like who we saw fighting Darth Maul, that was actually probably the first version of what we saw in Rebels. They're almost very similar in terms of how powerful they are and what they stand for.
It was a clear step change for the character in a lot of different ways. Yeah, absolutely. Very apparent.
Yeah. So, but that would feel like I was cheating or dipping into to both. So I didn't say that, but I like that you did because I'm the one who didn't. Okay, well, I think that's what we have so far for tonight. So hopefully you guys found this useful. Hopefully this is something that'll help you as kind of a primer going into the new Ahsoka series. Expect us to do more of these episodes on some of the characters from Star Wars Rebels specifically. We've got a Thrawn one, I think, that we're trying to get in there as well, because I think that's going to be super important, given that there's a rumor that he's going to be in the new series in some way. I'm kidding.
It will not be an Heir to the Empire review, by the way.
Yeah, we'll have to break. Yeah, I think we should just do a full breakdown of Heir to the Empire as well. But okay, so before we go, Jonesy, did you have any shout outs before we head out of here?
We absolutely did. If you are listening to the show, thank you for downloading the episode. But if you'd like to come out and join us on the live stream and join in the chat, have your comments thrown up on screen like these amazing people, cantinacast.com/YouTube. Jonathan, Steph, Rob, Kathy, Music Train, Sky, Gary, Jorge. If I missed anyone, my apologies. We see all of you in the background as well. Again, cantinacast.com/YouTube. You can find this live stream, subscribe, like the video, leave us a comment like you do on all of Lauren's videos. You're amazing at leaving Lauren comments. Leave us some comments too. Come on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What's up?
Give us your comments.
Right. But
yeah,
check out all the amazing content out there. Lauren, you're doing fantastic. Thank you so much for everything that you're putting out there. You're rock solid. It's amazing to have that extra content out there and really great High Republic stuff as we start to wrap up phase 2. And if you can believe this, phase 3, man, we're just a few months away from that too. We'll get out of Ahsoka and we'll get right into High Republic phase 3, it looks like.
Yep. Sorry, I was reading the comments here. Just quickly, Gary Smith chimed in. Rebels, specifically for me, the very best Ahsoka was fall to Vader. She wouldn't have abandoned Anakin again, and she would not let Vader get Ezra, then choosing to fall to her mentor, Chef's Kiss, and then Music Train said, great show. So thanks, everybody, for your comments and for joining us tonight for this live show. Let's see. We've got, again, coming up this weekend, we are going to get into our top moments of season 1 of Star Wars Rebels. So that should be exciting. I've had a chance to watch season 1 once, but now I want to go back and watch it again and actually take notes. I was on it just sitting there, just enjoying it and loving. I forgot just how much I freaking love that show.
So back up. Did you also watch Spark of Rebellion?
Yeah. The first two.
Is that technically part of season 1, or was it? Yeah,
because
it was released on DVD, right?
Yeah, it is. It's technically season 1.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't remember the whole Disney XD debacle thing. I can't remember what
it was separate from it for so long. Like you had to, trying to find Spark of Rebellion. It wasn't part of season 1 of Rebels for a long time. It was so weird. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think they've kind of merged those two together. So, and look at Dale chiming in here at the very last minute. So,
and Dale.
He got his name up there. Okay, Lauren, thank you so much for being here. Jonesy, thank you for being here. And we'll see you guys here very shortly on the next episode.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.